Welcome to the ITeachBlogging.com blogcast. Your host, Renee Grosskreutz, talks blog all day long and shares it all. No secrets here to help you become a successful blogger. Listen at the end of today's blogcast on how to get your free PDF of Renee's booklet, Tips on Blogging for Business. Now, here's Renee.
This is Renee, and this is podcast number 6. In this episode, we will recap a tip from the last podcast, cover a bit of blogging news, and then we are going to get down to it with tips on how to extend the life of a blog post. At the end of this episode, we will have my rants and raves. And here's a tip from the last podcast. It was tip number 6, don't just promote yourself. In the previous blogcast, ITB number 5, how to promote your blog with social media, a 10-step social media marketing plan. I discussed tips on how to promote your blog with social media. In this podcast, I talked about how social media is not just there for you to promote yourself. Do not make social media always about just you. Think of your reader and provide them with lots of valuable information, with a list of tips, and pre-schedule those for daily release. Once you have done that, then look for articles that complement your business and share them on social media. Remember, you want to provide great information. Always also find people to retweet on Twitter. We all appreciate retweets and shares of our articles, so if you share other people's information, they are far more likely to help spread the word on yours. And that is my tip number 6 from the previous podcast. And now for blogging news. Matt Cutts, the head of Google's web spam team, that's hard to say, wrote a blog post this week that has the blogging community in an uproar. The title was The Decay and Fall of Guest Post Blogging for SEO. Here's what he said in short. Okay, I'm calling it. If you're using guest blogging as a way to gain links in 2014, you should probably stop. Towards the end of the post, he says, so stick a fork in it. Guest blogging is done. It's just gotten too spammy. In general, I wouldn't recommend accepting a guest post blog unless you are willing to vouch for someone personally or know them well. Likewise, I wouldn't recommend relying on guest posting, guest blogging sites, or guest blogging SEO as a link building strategy. So what does this all mean, really? Well, that could be a podcast to itself, so I will just make a few points here. I always tell people to write for the humans, but keep the spiders in mind. And what I mean by spiders is the Google search engines, okay? If you read his full article, you will see that he is talking about the people who send out emails saying that they want to write a spammy guest post for you with lots of links and blah, blah, blah. This is not the same as an expert in your field writing a guest post of great value for you, and it is not the same as having a multi-author blog. A tip about guest post blogging. Before you guest post, have an established blog of your own. Have your Google authorship set up on your own blog and make sure that the same full name is used on the guest post. A guest post author should be an established blogger. In the show notes on this podcast, I'm going to link to an article at Search Engine Land that has quotes in response to this uproar from many famous bloggers and SEO experts. Go check it out. It is well worth the perspective. And now, let's get down to it. I am going to give you 6 tips on how to extend the life of a blog post. A while back, I was reading a post in LinkedIn group about blogging, and somebody said they were running out of ideas of things to blog about. I made a comment about an idea of extending the life of an existing blog post, and so here I'm going to give you 6 ideas on how to do that. Number 1, make a video based upon the previously released post. Videos are an important part of any marketing plan today, and they will only become more important as time marches on. More than 80% of marketers use videos on their website. I'm going to talk about this a little bit. YouTube is the second most search engine in the world. YouTube. Now, YouTube's owned by Google, so it gets a little bit confusing, but the thing about it is that videos are king. Videos make a big difference. People stay on a website page or a blog post page longer if there's a video on it. Stats just show that. So with that said, I thought I would give you a couple of tips on making videos that I have learned over time. And these are just a few tips. First one is buy an HD camcorder. This does not have to be some expensive one. It just makes sure it's ideal HD quality. I bought a Canon camcorder for about $300. You can get it off of Amazon. It's a great little camcorder. I'm actually launching a TV channel using this camcorder. It is a really good camcorder. The second thing I want to say is write a script. It is so incredibly important to know what you're going to say in advance. Video is hard enough. There's something about that camera just shining on you that makes you have to forget what to say. So having a script makes all the difference in the world. And listen, by the way, if you have a script, make sure that you practice it. Just having it alone is not sufficient. If at all possible, have an external mic. They make a huge difference. The camcorder mics, they're there and they do the job, but they pick up everything around, every single thing, and you need your video sound to be crisp. The last thing is use a video editing software so that you can put in an intro and an outro. I have a Mac, so I use iMovie. It's terrific. I love it. There's something similar for the PC. I can't remember what it's called, but I'll try to look it up and put it in my show notes here. Okay, so make a video. If you have a blog post, go back, read it. And even if all you do is sit in front of the camera and talk about that blog post, that is something of great value. Okay? The next thing that I want to say is that you could make a SlideShare out of it. SlideShare is a great website. It has over 60 million visits and 120 million page views per month. That is ridiculously big. All a SlideShare is basically a PowerPoint. So if you're familiar with PowerPoint, you can make yourself a SlideShare. And now, tip number 3. Update your blog post with new information. If you have a blog post that has proven to be particularly popular, but is a bit old, you should consider updating the post with new information. For example, in the world of social media, change is common. If we blog about a social media platform and how to use it, we would expect the platform to have updates, sometimes almost before we even publish the darn blog post, seriously. But if you're doing any type of informational or how-to blog, then you can probably find ways to add more content or to update an even popular blog post. If your blog post is about philosophical in the nature, you could probably update it in the new ideas. So, don't think that just because a podcast is done, that it's ever truly done. There's always things you can do to add, and you can repost. A lot of popular bloggers do this, and this is just a really great idea. So, tip number 4. Create a list of resources that are related to the topic. So a great example of this is if you've done a how to do something type of post that's focused on very specific tips and steps, the odds are good that you could do an associated blog post on what tools you use to accomplish those goals. For example, I could do a blog post about the tools that I use to create each post, such as Evernote, SpringPad, MindJet, etc. If your business is lawn care and you did a blog post on tips about watering the lawn, you could follow up with reviews on different types of water hoses and sprinklers. The options here are endless. So for every how-to post, you could probably follow up with a tools about that post. Tip number 5. Create an infographic out of the post. Infographics are really freaking hot right now. They're cool. They're awesome. They're a little challenging to make, so you might want to go to Fiverr and hire someone to do it, or you might find a free template out there. There's so many opportunities and ways to do it. But here's my tip to you. If you make an infographic, which I highly recommend, then make sure you put your business name, your logo, and your website URL on it, because you should expect that other people are going to share that infographic and references, and that's what you want to happen. But you always want it to trace back to you. So put your business name, your logo, and your web URL, because remember, you are the real resource here. And tip number 6, create a podcast. That's what I'm doing. Create a podcast out of an old blog post, which is exactly what I have done here. I have an old blog post called Extend the Life of a Blog Post, and I have gone backwards and made a podcast out of it. Podcast can be very easy to do. In all honesty, it really was not that hard. If you have any questions, please let me know. I'd be happy to help. There's some better experts out there because I am just getting started, as I'm sure you can tell by listening to this. So, tip number 1, make a video. Great idea. Tip number 2, make a SlideShare, of course, which is just like a PowerPoint, put on SlideShare website. Update the post with new information. That was tip number 3. Tip number 4, create a list of resources that are related to the topic. Tip number 5, create an infographic out of the post. And tip number 6, make a podcast. And now for the rants and raves. Today, it's mostly just a freaking rant. I officially hate website pop-ups. For a long time, I even used them myself. They were smaller than the average, but they were there. I even wanted to buy a pop-up plugin middle of last year. It was cool. And if I can find the link, I'll share it with you on my show notes because maybe you still love them. I know that not everyone feels the same way as me. The stats show that they are really helpful, and I get it, but I still hate them. It is so incredibly annoying when I click on a website and I'm anxious to read something, and maybe I got the first sentence, and then there it is, taking over the screen, the pop-up. And suddenly, I have to figure out how to close it. The X is not always in the same spot, and sometimes it is virtually impossible to close. And if I'm on my phone, which is just over 60% of the searchers these days, forget about it. I probably cannot close it anyways. This is when I hit the back button, people. There are over 70 million blogs and websites on WordPress alone, so I can always find another resource. As a matter of fact, my bookmarks blog, reneeoutofoffice.com, I have created a category called I Hate Your Websites. So that is my rant for the day, folks. What do you think? Thank you for listening to iteachblogging.com blogcast with me, Renee Grosskreutz. Visit iteachblogging.com/show notes. I will have the PDF download for you at that link, along with useful links that we talked about today. Go forth and blog.